owning Bitcoin means being your own bank is because when we talk about banks in the traditional sense, we as people are asking permission to an institution to hold our money and move our money. When we talk about Bitcoin, if those are the two functions that we're giving to someone, like we're giving responsibility to someone in the traditional sense, in Bitcoin, we do both of those completely without asking permission. So we can move Bitcoin whenever we want without asking permission to anyone. We can set up an account whenever we want without asking anyone. So we are effectively our own bank. We deposit into our own account that we set up with 12 or 24 words, and we can move it to whoever we want, right? So if you look at all of the responsibilities and the duties that a bank has, which is keep your money safe and move your money whenever you want it to before asking, like after asking them permission, then all of those duties can be completed by you as a person when you're on the Bitcoin network. You are your own bank in Bitcoin. You don't have to ask anyone permission. Basically, that's what it is. It's freedom with your money because you are not banking with anyone. You're banking yourself on Bitcoin. Depends where you are in the world and which jurisdiction you're in. Because in El Salvador, I can be my own bank without ever having to worry about, oh no, I can't pay this bill because they don't accept Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. They will always accept Bitcoin if you're looking in the right places, right? So El Salvador is laying out the blueprint of what the future world will look like with Bitcoin in it. But we as Canadians are still tied to the fiat system, and we have to abide by their rules until the system is shut down and everyone accepts Bitcoin everywhere. As soon as El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as legal tender, no one rushed to accept Bitcoin, right? It was all of the foreigners. The locals still had to be educated and trained on this new thing and why it was valuable to them. Now, 2 years or more after the legal tender law, what we've seen is an increase in tourism, an increase in GDP because the government of El Salvador keeps buying one Bitcoin every single day. And number three, more immigration. So not just tourism, but immigration into the country from Bitcoiners like myself that are trying to move there to live on a Bitcoin standard. What does that do? More people are bringing money into the country just because people are accepting Bitcoin in this jurisdiction, in this country. So that starts a game of chess between countries. Because if Canada says, people are leaving to go to El Salvador, why? Oh, they want to spend Bitcoin? Okay, well then Canada has to become a Bitcoin-friendly place to keep them living here rather than taking their monetary energy to another country. So El Salvador is laying out the blueprint for countries that want tourism and want to increase their GDP and want to decentralize their financial system. I would say that that's a major contributor. And if I had to guess, I would say that 50% of all people moving to El Salvador to live are Canadians. Yeah, it's a lot. If you go and visit and you go to Bitcoin meetups and all of this stuff, the majority of the people that you talk to will be Canadians. The theory is that after the trucker protests, right, when people had their bank accounts frozen, people were looking for a way out. And the only country that offered them a way out with their Bitcoin was El Salvador. And that's where people went to first. El Salvador was also one of the places, I think, that did not require a vaccine passport or a vaccine verification to come into the country after all the lockdowns. And so there's a lot of people from Australia that moved from Australia to El Salvador, New Zealand to El Salvador, because that's the first country that they could get into And just a bonus, they accept Bitcoin as legal tender. The residency process is you pay for a visa, which is $90 at the airport when you land, and then you start your process. You can fill out the paperwork yourself, or you can pay a lawyer to do it, which will cost you $2,000 to $3,000 US. Once the lawyer files all the paperwork, you have to stay in the country for, I believe, 9 months out of the year. And you can do that consecutively for 5 years before having the option to apply for citizenship at the end of those 5 years. $1 million in Bitcoin, you can pay $1 million for the citizenship today, but I would never do that. Living with Bitcoin is 10 times better than without Bitcoin, because you don't have to stand in line at the bank. You can send money to whoever you want. So I lived there for a month completely on Bitcoin, and it was extremely easy for me because I never had to convert from Canadian dollars to US dollars. And even for someone in there in El Salvador that's saving in Bitcoin, they can just, they never have to step into a bank ever again. They did not have a currency that they had to defend. So they could easily introduce Bitcoin into their financial system without sacrificing their own currency. And this is why I don't think that Canada or the US will ever adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, because they have a currency that they have to protect. The US dollar and Bitcoin remain as legal tender. So people can use US dollars all the time. Some people prefer it, some people don't. So you can use whatever you want as long as it's Bitcoin or US dollars.